She almost didn't stop. That's the thing nobody talks about. The moment right before the decision, when you could just keep walking and no one would ever know. Delia Marsh had been on her feet for 11 hours. Her left shoe had a crack along the sole that let in cold air every time her heel hit the pavement, and she'd stopped feeling her toes somewhere around the 4th hour. The grocery bag in her right hand had cut a red line into her palm. She was carrying 2 cans of soup, a box of crackers, a bottle of children's Tylenol, and the cheaper brand of orange juice because the good kind was $1.40 more, and $1.40 mattered this week. It mattered most weeks, actually. It mattered in ways that people who'd never had to think about $1.40 could not possibly understand. She was 41 years old, and she looked tired in the way that isn't fixed by sleep, the kind of tired that settles into the lines around your eyes and the set of your jaw and the way you carry your shoulders like you're bracing for whatever comes next. She wore a gray coat that had been washed so many times the wool had gone thin at the elbows. Her hair was pulled back because she hadn't had time to do anything with it that morning, which was the same as every morning, because her daughter Bex had a fever, and getting Bex to swallow Tylenol without spitting it back out took roughly 40 minutes of negotiations, and by the time that was done, the school bus was already gone, and Delia had to walk Bex to her aunt's place 3 blocks over before catching the second bus to the restaurant, where she'd worked the lunch and dinner rush back to back. This is who she was on the night she found the envelope. It was November, and the temperature had dropped fast after sundown the way it does in the Midwest. 1 hour it's cold, the next it's something meaner than cold. Delia had her head down against the wind cutting off Lake Shore when she nearly stepped on it. A thick cream-colored envelope, face down on the wet sidewalk, half tucked under the iron leg of a bus stop bench like it had been kicked there or blown there or just fallen from someone's bag without them noticing. She stopped. She looked at it for a second, looked around. The street was empty in both directions, just wind and yellow streetlight, and the hiss of a car passing 2 blocks up. She picked it up. The envelope was heavy in a way that made her heart do something she didn't have a name for. It was sealed, monogrammed with a small gold V on the flap, and on the front written in a sharp slanting hand, "For the Founders Circle Gala, table escort documents urgent." She opened it. Delia Marsh was not a thief. She told herself that clearly, out loud, there on the empty sidewalk, "I am not a thief," and then she looked inside because she needed to know what she had found so she could figure out what to do with it. There were papers, documents folded in thirds, and a card, a personal card with an embossed name and a downtown address. And underneath the papers, in a clear plastic sleeve, 5 crisp $100 bills held together with a paper clip. $500. Delia stood very still. The wind pushed at her back. The grocery bag swung against her leg. She thought about Bex's fever and the crack in her shoe and the children's Tylenol she'd just bought because the brand name kind cost $4 more. She thought about the electric bill she'd been paying in partial payments since September. She thought about Bex's coat, the one with the broken zipper that Delia had been meaning to replace for 3 weeks, but kept not replacing because there was always something more urgent. $500. Nobody would know. That thought appeared fully formed, the way those thoughts always do. Not creeping in but arriving, presenting itself like a reasonable option. Nobody would know. You found it on the street. Money doesn't have a name on it. You need this more than whoever lost it. People with embossed envelopes don't need $500 the way you need $500. She stood there for probably 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Then she looked at the card again. Vivian Alcott Stroud, an address on North Michigan Avenue, and a handwritten notepaper clipped to the documents inside. If found, please return immediately. These materials are irreplaceable. The Founders Circle cannot proceed without them. Irreplaceable. She thought about that word for a moment. Irreplaceable. Not just the money, the papers. Whatever was in those documents mattered to someone in a way that money alone couldn't fix. Someone somewhere tonight was probably tearing apart their car, their bag, retracing their steps in a panic, looking for this exact envelope. Delia Marsh knew exactly what that feeling was. She'd felt it with Bex's medical card when it went missing for 2 weeks, before she found it in the pocket of a jacket she never wore. She'd felt it with her lease renewal when the mail got wet. She knew what it was to need something that couldn't be replaced and not be able to find it. She put the envelope under her arm, shifted the grocery bag to her other hand, and started walking north. North Michigan Avenue was 42 blocks away. She did not have enough on her transit card for another bus. It took her an hour and 19 minutes, walking into the wind, the grocery bag handle cutting deeper into her palm with every block. Her left shoe let in the cold the whole way. Around block 20, she started counting steps, just to give herself something to do, that wasn't thinking about how much she wanted to stop, and around block 30 she stopped counting because it wasn't helping. She thought about turning back 4 times. She counted those too. The first time was around block 12, when the wind got bad enough that her eyes started watering, and she couldn't tell anymore if she was crying or just cold. She told herself she'd make it to the next intersection, and then decide. She got to the next intersection and kept going. The second time was around block 22, when she passed a woman in a long coat walking a small white dog, and the woman looked at Delia the way people sometimes looked at her. A quick flicker of assessment, the slight repositioning of the purse strap, the careful not-quite-eye contact. Delia knew what that look meant. She'd been receiving it her whole life. She thought, I don't owe anyone anything. I don't owe this city anything. I found money on the street and I'm walking 42 blocks in November to give it back and no one will ever even say thank you. She kept walking. The third time was block 31, when she reached into her coat pocket for her phone to check the address again and realized her phone had died somewhere around block 25, and she hadn't noticed because she'd stopped checking it. She stood at the corner of a street she didn't recognize for a moment, genuinely unsure which direction to go, and thought, this is the universe telling you to stop. Then she flagged down a man walking out of a dry cleaner's and asked him where North Michigan was, and he pointed without really looking at her, and she went. The fourth time was the lobby of 840 North Michigan Avenue, when the doorman looked at her coat, her bag, her windburned face, the envelope clutched against her side, and said, in the particular tone that doormen in buildings like this had perfected over generations, "Can I help you?" Not a question, a wall. "I'm here to return something to Vivian Alcott Stroud," Delia said. "I found her. She's missing documents for something called the Founders Circle Gala." The doorman, his name tag said Gerald, did not move. He had the practiced stillness of someone who'd spent decades deciding who was allowed past and who wasn't, and everything about Delia Marsh told him she wasn't. "Miss Muse Alcott Stroud is hosting an event this evening," he said. "She's not available." "I understand. I just need to get this to her. I walked from the bus stop on. You can leave it with me, and I'll see that it gets to her." Delia looked at him. She was cold and her feet hurt, and she had spent an hour and 19 minutes walking into a November wind to stand in this lobby, and she understood exactly what was happening. He wasn't going to take that envelope anywhere near anyone named Alcott Stroud. He was going to put it behind his desk and deal with it when he had a moment, which would be after the gala, which would be too late for whatever irreplaceable thing was inside. "I'd prefer to give it to her directly," Delia said, "or to whoever is assisting her tonight. There's a note inside that says these materials are needed immediately. Ma'am, Gerald." She said his name the way you say someone's name when you want them to hear that you're paying attention. "I'm not trying to cause a problem. I walked 42 blocks in the cold because someone lost something important, and I want to make sure it gets to the right person. That's all. If you can radio someone upstairs and let them know the Founders Circle envelope has been found, I'll wait right here." He looked at her for another long moment. Then he picked up the phone on his desk. The woman who came down in the elevator was not Vivian Alcott Stroud. She was younger, mid-30s, wearing the kind of black dress that cost more than Delia's monthly rent, with the efficient, slightly irritated energy of someone who has been pulled away from something important. Her name, she said, was Phoebe Langford, and she was Miss Alcott Stroud's personal assistant. "You found the envelope," she said, her eyes moving from Delia's face to the envelope, to the grocery bag, to the elevator door and back, as if she were triangulating something. "On the sidewalk by a bus stop on South Lake Shore," Delia said. "Around 7:15. That's 3 miles from here, 42 blocks. I walked." Phoebe Langford took the envelope, opened it, looked at the documents inside with the rapid efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for, and then looked at Delia with an expression that was not quite gratitude, and not quite suspicion, but was doing its best to split the difference. "The money is still here," Delia said quietly. "All of it. I didn't. I need you to know that." "Of course," Phoebe said in the tone of someone who had not assumed that, and was now recalibrating. "There were $500 bills," Delia said, "in a clear sleeve. I counted them when I found the envelope so I'd know, and they're all still there." Phoebe looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Wait here," and went back to the elevator. Delia stood in the lobby. Gerald did not offer her a chair. She stood with her grocery bag, and her ruined left shoe, and her red-lined palm, and she waited, because she had already walked 42 blocks, and she was going to see this through to the end. Vivian Alcott Stroud came down 11 minutes later. She was 63 years old, silver-haired, wearing a steel-blue gown that moved like water. She was the kind of woman who took up exactly as much space as she intended to, and not an inch more, which was still more than most people in any room. She'd built Alcott Capital from a $400,000 inheritance into a $3.2 billion portfolio over 31 years. She sat on the boards of 4 hospitals and 2 universities. Her late husband's name was on a library at Northwestern. But none of that was why she stopped 3 feet from Delia Marsh in her hotel lobby and looked at her the way she did. She looked at her the way people look at someone who has genuinely surprised them. "You walked here," Vivian said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "From where?" "South Lake Shore, the bus stop near Garfield." "That's—" she paused. "That's over 3 miles. 42 blocks, Delia said. "Closer to 4. In this weather." The documents said they were irreplaceable. I didn't want to wait until morning. Vivian Alcott Stroud was quiet for a moment. She held the envelope in both hands like it was something fragile. "Do you know what's in here?" she said. "No, ma'am. I didn't read the papers. Only enough to find your name. These are the founding charter documents for the Alcott Children's Literacy Foundation," Vivian said. "Original signed copies. We've been working for 2 years to get every signature authenticated. If these had been lost—" She stopped. "We would have had to start over. The gala tonight was the official launch. We were going to present them." Delia nodded. She didn't say anything, because she could feel that Vivian wasn't finished. "My assistant dropped the envelope getting out of the car," Vivian said. 3 miles from here. She didn't notice until we were upstairs." She paused again. "No one found it and called. No one turned it in at a police station. You found it and you walked 4 miles in November at night to bring it to me. It wasn't mine," Delia said simply. "The way you say something true." Vivian looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Come with me." Delia tried to explain that she was fine, that she had to get the soup home to Beck's, that her daughter had a fever, that she really didn't need anything, she just wanted to make sure the envelope got to the right person. She said all of this to Phoebe Langford, who was walking her gently but firmly toward a side room off the lobby, a small warm sitting room with a couch and a tray of food that had clearly been set up for staff. "Please," Phoebe said, "just wait here for a moment." Delia sat. She held the grocery bag in her lap. She ate a piece of bread because she hadn't eaten since 11 that morning, and her body made the decision before her mind could argue with it. She looked around the room, the soft lighting, the heavy curtains, the kind of careful comfort that costs money without looking like it's trying, and she thought, "This is not my world." She thought that without bitterness, only as a fact. It was not her world. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Bronzeville with her daughter, and a radiator that banged all night, and a landlord who took 3 weeks to fix anything. She worked 11-hour shifts at a restaurant where the manager called her Han, and the tips were inconsistent, and she was grateful for the job because she'd been between jobs for 7 months before she got it. And 7 months of nothing had taught her exactly how thin the margin was between a life that works and one that doesn't. She was thinking about that margin when Vivian Alcott Stroud came into the room. She was not alone. With her was a man Delia hadn't seen before, mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He sat down across from Delia, and Vivian sat beside him, and for a moment the 3 of them just existed in the same room together. "This is my son-in-law, Warren," Vivian said. "He's been running the foundation's operations since we launched." Warren leaned forward. "We'd like to offer you something," he said. "Not as a transaction, not as payment. We've been looking for a community liaison for the Literacy Foundation, Someone who knows Chicago's South Side neighborhoods, who understands what families there need, who can help us make sure the programs we're building actually reach the people they're supposed to reach." He paused. "The position pays $62,000 a year. Benefits, it's not. Why me?" Delia said. Warren looked at her steadily. "Because tonight you walked 4 miles in the cold to do the right thing when no one was watching. And because you just said very clearly, 'Why me?' Not yes, and not how much, and not what's the catch. That tells me something." Delia was quiet for a moment. Her grocery bag crinkled slightly in her hands. "I have a daughter," she said. "She's 7. She has a fever right now. We know. Vivian's arranged a car to take you home with whatever you need tonight. You can think about the position. There's no pressure, no deadline. What's the work actually like?" And Warren told her. For 20 minutes he told her, while Vivian sat quietly and listened. He told her about the neighborhoods they were trying to reach, the schools that had already said yes, the libraries that didn't have enough books, the parents who wanted to help their kids read but didn't know how because no one had helped them. He told her about the gap between a foundation's good intentions and what actually happens on the ground when you don't have someone who knows the ground. He told her what the role needed and what it didn't require and what they hoped it could become. Delia listened the way she'd learned to listen, completely, without filling the silence, hearing what was said and what wasn't. When he finished, she said, "I'd want to meet the families first. Before I said yes, I'd want to go to the neighborhoods and actually talk to people." Warren smiled, slowly, like he'd been hoping for exactly that answer. "That," he said, "is exactly what we need." The car that took Delia home that night was warm and quiet and had heated seats, which she'd never sat in before, and she didn't say that out loud. She just sat with the warmth moving up through her back and thought about Bex and the radiator and the landlord who took 3 weeks and the electric bill and the crack in her shoe. She thought, "Tomorrow everything is the same. I still have to figure out the electric bill. Bex still has a fever. The shoe still has a crack." And then she thought, "But the thing that changes isn't always the thing you think it is." Her phone was dead. She'd charge it when she got home. She had soup for Bex. She had the Tylenol. She had 42 blocks of cold wind behind her and something she hadn't had that morning. A name, a number, a question she actually wanted to think about. She got home at 10:17. Her sister Renee, who'd been watching Bex, opened the door before Delia could get her key out and said, "Where have you been? I texted you 4 hours ago." And Delia said, "My phone died. I'll explain in a minute. How's Bex?" And Renee said, "She fell asleep around 9. Fever's down a little. She kept asking for you." And Delia went straight to the bedroom where her daughter was sleeping with her mouth slightly open, and her hair stuck to her forehead in the way it got when she had a fever, and Delia sat on the edge of the bed very gently and put her hand on Bex's back. Bex stirred, didn't wake. "I'm here," Delia said very quietly. "I'm right here." And she sat there in the dark for a while, with her hand on her daughter's back, thinking about 42 blocks and a cream-colored envelope and a word, irreplaceable, and what it meant when you applied it to something other than a document. She called Warren's number the next morning. Bex's fever had broken in the night. The apartment was cold because the radiator was having one of its mornings, but the sunlight was coming through the kitchen window at the angle Delia liked, the one that hit the blue coffee mug on the counter and made it look like it was lit from inside. She had made coffee. She had gotten Bex to eat half a piece of toast and declare herself basically better. She had fixed the grocery bag crack in her shoe with the tape she kept in the utility drawer for exactly this reason. Then she sat at the kitchen table and dialed. Warren picked up on the second ring. "I have conditions," Delia said. "Not many, but I want them said out loud before I say yes." "Tell me," Warren said. She told him. She wanted a real desk and real responsibilities, not a ceremonial role. She wanted to report directly to him, not through 3 layers of assistants. She wanted to be in the neighborhoods every week, not just at quarterly meetings in downtown offices. She wanted a budget for community events that she controlled, not a committee. Warren was quiet for a moment after she finished. Then he said, "Delia, all of that is already written into the job description. We just didn't lead with it because most people don't ask." She sat with that for a second. "Okay," she said. "Is that a yes?" She looked at the blue mug in the sunlight. She looked at Bex, who had wandered into the kitchen with a blanket around her shoulders and was opening the refrigerator with the suspicious expression of someone who has not yet decided if she is hungry. "That's a yes," Delia said. 6 months later, the Alcott Children's Literacy Foundation had programs in 11 Southside schools and 4 branch libraries. Delia had personally introduced the foundation's team to 47 families who'd been invisible to the kind of organization that meant well but didn't know where to look. She had helped develop a parent reading program that met on Saturday mornings and had a wait list. She had sat in rooms where decisions were made and said the things that needed saying, and people had listened, not because of who she was on paper, but because she knew what she was talking about, and she said it clearly, and she did not apologize for taking up space. She had also replaced her left shoe. Bex, for her part, was reading 3 grade levels ahead, and had strong opinions about which books were good and which ones were just okay, and she communicated these opinions loudly to anyone who asked, and several people who didn't. Delia considered this a success on multiple levels. One evening in April, Delia was locking up the small office the foundation had given her, a real desk, real responsibilities, a window that looked out over a street she knew, when her phone buzzed with a text from Vivian Alcott-Stroud. "Delia, the board met today. They've approved an expansion budget for the Southside programs, $1.2 million over 2 years. This doesn't happen without the work you've done. Thank you." Delia read the message twice. Then she locked her office, took the elevator down, walked out onto the street, and stood for a moment in the April air that was finally warm enough to not require a coat, or at least not the heavy one. She thought about that bus stop on South Lake Shore, the envelope under the bench, the 30 seconds when nobody was watching and nobody would have known. She thought about walking 42 blocks, and she thought, not every right thing announces itself. Sometimes it's just an envelope on a wet sidewalk, and you either stop or you don't, and everything comes from that. If you're watching this right now, think about that moment in your own life, the moment when you could have walked past something and no one would have known. Maybe it wasn't an envelope. Maybe it was a choice, a word, a door you could have closed or left open. Maybe nobody saw it but you. Those moments matter maybe more than any other kind. If Delia's story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted, that what you do when no one's watching is exactly who you are, please share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Velvet Reckoning. We'll be right here telling the truth about what people are capable of when they think no one is looking, because someone always is.